Wanted to talk, Judge Crawford, about the 1849 abortion ban, which right now is on hold in Wisconsin. But it also seems like Brad Schimmel is very much in favor of that law, which, if I understand it
Yeah.
correctly, only has exceptions for the life of the mother, but even that comes with some caveats.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Brad Schimmel has said repeatedly that he thinks there's nothing wrong with that law and it should be fully enforced. And like you said, no exceptions for things like rape or incest or even sexually abused children in that law. And as I've been out campaigning, I have had doctors and midwives and women approach me and tell me really personal stories about women who were forced to go out of state for health care while that law was briefly in effect before the judge put it on hold. And those are scary stories. These are women who were having a crisis in a pregnancy and needed health care, and they were unable to get it in their own state and had to be transported to, Minnesota or Illinois or wherever.
Yes, we have another election less than 5 weeks from today, April 1st. Wisconsin voting for who will take a spot on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Brad Schimmel is running against Judge Susan Crawford, who joins us now on the phone. Judge Crawford, thank you so very much for joining us. Oh, wait, we put up the wrong picture. Apologies for that on our live stream. Calvin, can you switch that? There we go. Judge Crawford, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Jane.
Judge Crawford, I wanted to start off with this. Brad Schimmel, who was your opponent, has come down on the side of the January 6th attackers at the U.S. Capitol. He says that they weren't given a fair shot in court. At the same time, you are being accused of being soft on crime. How do you respond to that accusation?
Yeah, I was really shocked to hear that Brad Schimmel, who really touts his law and order credentials, was making excuses and defending these this violent mob that stormed the Capitol and attacked Capitol police officers. So I think it just shows that his support for law enforcement is just on the surface. It's not something he really believes in. And I'm somebody who has deep experience as a prosecutor, and later as a lawyer defending people in court, and now as a judge. And I'm just astonished at Brad Schimmel's defense of those people. And then even he went so far as to say he had no objection to President Trump's blanket pardons of everybody involved in that insurrection. So I'm almost at a loss for words to comment on that.
Judge Crawford, you are being hit pretty hard, though, on some of the cases that you've ruled on in the past.
Yeah, that's Elon Musk's money hard at work trying to distort my record on public safety. Those ads have, all kinds of lies and misrepresentations in them. I'm proud of the work I have done, both as a prosecutor and as a judge. I always put public safety first. I make sure I give crime victims rights, protection in the process. And, they're talking about cases where I sentenced people to several years in prison and long periods of supervision by the Department of Corrections afterward. Meanwhile, we have reams of cases, dozens of cases where Brad Schimmel gave people no jail time or short jail time and released them for crimes like domestic violence and child abuse. And those people went on to reoffend. That's the real test of a sentence is did those people go on to create new victims and hurt people again? And that's Brad Schimmel's record.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. Right before you joined us, we were talking about some of the January 6th attackers who received those blanket pardons, and a number of them had
Yeah.
previous convictions or even current convictions involving rape and sexual assault, and as you said,
Yeah.
sexual
Yep.
abuse of minors.
Yep. A lot of those folks were repeat offenders, and it wouldn't shock me if those people go on to commit additional crimes now that they're back at large in the community. it's really a shame.
If you're just joining us, Judge Susan Crawford is joining us on the phone. She is a candidate for the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The election is on April 1st. And if you're not sure where to go, if you're not registered to vote, please take care of that. Go to myvote.wi.gov. All you have to do is put in your address, and that will tell you what's on your ballot, who all of your elected officials are, how you can contact them, etc. I also wanted to talk, Judge Crawford, about the 1849 abortion ban, which right now is on hold in Wisconsin. But it also seems like Brad Schimmel is very much in favor of that law, which, if I understand it correctly, only has exceptions for the life of the mother, but even that comes with some caveats.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, Brad Schimmel has said repeatedly that he thinks there's nothing wrong with that law and it should be fully enforced. And like you said, no exceptions for things like rape or incest or even sexually abused children in that law. And, as I've been out campaigning, I have had doctors and midwives and women approach me and tell me really personal stories about women who were forced to go out of state for health care while that law was briefly in effect before the judge put it on hold. And those are scary stories. These are women who were having a crisis in a pregnancy and needed health care, and they were unable to get it in their own state and had to be transported to, Minnesota or Illinois or wherever. And that's, that has to be concerning to every voter in Wisconsin. And I say every voter, not every woman, but every voter in Wisconsin should be concerned that a candidate for the Wisconsin Supreme Court thinks that that's no problem.
And I think it's important, Judge Crawford, that folks also understand that just because this 1849 ban is on hold right now, that doesn't mean that the full range of services are available all over the state of Wisconsin. We had a guest on earlier this week, young married woman with a wanted pregnancy who had complications. I believe it was in the second trimester. She had to wait almost 24 hours before she was able to get the care that she needed, and she developed sepsis and now is having problems conceiving and having another wanted child.
Yeah, exactly. There's just story after story like that. I was talking to an OB/GYN the other day who told me that before the 1849 ban was put on hold, that they literally had patients who were, lying in a hospital bed in critical condition while the doctors are in a huddle, talking about, is it close enough to her losing her life?
Yeah.
Can we take action? Because they're concerned about liability. Doctors and hospitals are really worried about liability, and they're not going to rush into something. So that's one of the problems with these laws that make an exception only for the life of the mother, is how close to death are you going to let the woman get before you give her healthcare services?
It is.
So we've heard those stories over and over, and that's where we're at, and that's the result of the Dobbs decision from the U.S. Supreme Court that took away over almost 50 years of constitutional protections that women could rely on.
We were just accused by a listener of citing an outlying case of this Laurel, who joined us this week. This is not an outlier. This is happening in emergency rooms. Good heavens, we've talked about cases where women have been bleeding out in the parking lots of emergency rooms because they're not close enough to dead yet to get health care.
Exactly. And I've had healthcare providers, as I said, approach me and tell me those stories themselves. And, it is, somebody saying this is an outlier. Well, how many women are you going to let die? How many outliers before you do something about it? And Brad Schimmel, one other thing with his position, he said, we could have a referendum, put it to the voters.
Yeah.
Well, Wisconsin law doesn't allow that. We don't have a way to just let voters directly decide on an issue like abortion rights in Wisconsin. That's why it's in the courts. And he wants to sort of pass the buck and say, let the voters determine this in a referendum, which is impossible, or let the legislature decide this. And again, the legislature has shown no interest in it, and that's why it's in the courts.
we were talking about this before you joined us, and essentially it's his way to make himself look reasonable. Like, I just want to do what the voters want, and all we have to do is have a statewide referendum, even though that is not a thing that exists in Wisconsin.
Exactly. Yeah, he is trying to run away from his record. He has been a long time opponent of abortion rights, dating back to at least 2012 when he signed on to a Wisconsin Right to Life white paper that said, when Roe versus Wade is overturned, that 1849 law will go into effect. He was advocating for that way back then. Then as Attorney General, he was fighting to defend unconstitutional restrictions on abortion rights in Wisconsin, and not just in Wisconsin, but he was trying to defend unconstitutional restrictions on abortion rights even in other states, wading into litigation in other states to argue against women's reproductive health care rights. So he's got a long, long record on this issue. Hired a top lawyer into the Wisconsin Department of Justice, who we now know was part of the conservative legal movement that developed a legal strategy to overturn Roe versus Wade. And now he's saying, gosh, Dobbs just sent it back to the states and maybe there can be a referendum. This is a problem of Brad Schimmel's own making. This is what he wanted to see happen, is for women to lose this constitutional protection. And, now he's trying to run away from that record.
I think we played a clip of him talking, and he asked the question, where is the flaw? How is this wrong? And to ask the question of a 19th century law, what's flawed with that? Looking back now, almost 200 years later, to not even look at the language and say, what's wrong with this? That says a lot about who he is. And just the fact that he doesn't know that the people can't vote on a binding referendum.
He knows that.
I mean, or to play up that is just absolutely.
He's just lying.
Yeah.
Judge Crawford, we're just about out of time. I know a lot of folks are wondering when you're going to take the gloves off and start running some ads and getting out in front of some of these attacks on you.
Yeah. We've got more ads coming, and I'll defend my record any day. Like I said, I've always been about the safety of the community, and we're going to fight off the lies paid for by Elon Musk. And you know why Elon Musk is in this. He thinks that Brad Schimmel is going to be his bag man on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and that's something that Brad Schimmel's really familiar with. He once called himself Scott Walker's bag man back when he was Attorney General, and he's willing to sell out justice to the highest bidder.
Just one more thing. Do you promise not to have commemorative coins if you're elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court and spend $10,000 of our taxpayer money on those?
Absolutely. I will make that promise here and now.
Appreciate that. Judge Susan Crawford on the phone. Thank you so much for your time, Judge Crawford. Really, really appreciate it. Stay with us. You are listening to Matt and Air on Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network. We'll be right back.